Okay, guys, so if you're honors math, this is lesson 4.3. If you are the math 7 class, this is lesson 3.3. And today we're talking about representing and using the percent equation. Now, this is kind of interesting for me because you guys, I've told you before, I have dyslexia. And so using this equation is a little bit difficult for me. I found other ways to use it. So I'm going to show you how to use the equation, but I'm also going to show you how I've been able to figure out to use things too. So our essential question you're going to want to remember today says, how are percent problems related to proportional reasoning? Okay, so in the first example that we had, it can be quite confusing depending on how you're looking at it. I think the way they explained it is really confusing, so I'm going to break it down. Okay, what they're saying is the lady in the vertical reach, so if she reaches up her hands, her vertical reach is 75 inches. Her height, her actual height, is 60 inches. And they want to know what percent. Okay, so they actually say this. This is where I get my thing. It says in the question on the example, what percent of her total vertical reach is her height? That is the perfect sentence for me. And I'm going to show you why. But the equation that they're saying to represent percent is to use this. It's part equals percent multiplied by whole. Okay, so in other words, what we're saying is the part here is the 60 inches. So it ends up being 60 inches equals the percent we don't know. So I put in X for that, and then we multiply that by the whole, which is the 75 inches. This is why I think this one doesn't really work for me, because every time I see the whole, I want to use the larger one. And I have to remember that it's of a certain one. So I want to use the larger number as the whole amount. Okay. Now, doing this, guys, you have to remember, okay, this is something that I've taught a little bit of, and I want you to watch carefully how I do this. So what I need to do is to find out what X is. We didn't know what the percent is. We need to remember that X is a percent. So I'm going to isolate this variable. Now, because I'm multiplying here, I'm going to divide by 75. 75 divided by 75 is 1. 1 times X is simply X. But in order to do this, I have to go through and also divide by 75 on this side. If I don't divide by 75 on both sides, the equation does not stay equal. So this is gone. X is by itself. Now, if you divide 60 by 75, you're going to get 0.8 equals X. Now, we're not done yet. 0.8 is a decimal. We need this as a percent. In order to put it as a percent, we can multiply it by 100, or you can move the decimal over 2 places. So X actually becomes 80%. So in other words, her height is 80% of her vertical reach. Okay. Now I'm going to show you real quick. We solve it the same way, but how I come up with the equation. Okay. Now this comes from me going through and listening to people and actually hearing what they're saying and then putting those words that they're saying into actual parts of the equation. When I say what percent, that means I don't know what the percent is. So for me, I'm going to say that that's X. What percent means I don't know what it is. Of always means multiplication. Of is multiplication. Then this says her total vertical reach. Well, we know her vertical reach is 75. And then is always means equals. Equals her height, which is 60 inches. We come up with the same equation, basically listening for keywords like of and is. Of and is. Of means multiplication, is means equals. Okay. I came up with this because my wife actually said to me, hey, what is 60% of $50? Okay, 60% off, right? She had a 60% off on a $50 item. What is 60% of $50? What, so I don't know what it is 60% of is multiplication $50. If I turn this into a decimal, I can actually go through and multiply it by 50 and get that answer. Okay, so if you need more explanation than that, let me know. We'll go through it. Okay, guys? All right, so let's look at example 3. Example 3. So this is what I'm talking about where I get a little confused. So I wrote it again. Part equals percent multiplied by whole. Okay, what they're talking about here is you have a pair of retail jeans. Now the jeans, when they say retail, that means what they would sell them to you for if you came into the store. So like if you went into Walmart, you picked up a pair of jeans, they're selling them for $28. They're saying that their markup is 15%. In other words, whatever they buy them for, it's going to be 15% markup to get to that $28. Now, here's where this gets a little confusing for me. This is where this part equals percent multiplied by whole makes it hard. Because I'm sitting here going, okay, I know the percent, and actually because it is a markup, we have to go 115%. That's what they showed in the actual problem, but it is just a 15% markup of what they paid. So I know this percent, which is 115, but I get confused. Is the whole the $28 or is that the part? Okay. And actually it's the part which makes this confusing. I don't know this, I know this. And we have to remember that this percent needs to be turned into a decimal. So that's where I get confused. So I actually found myself actually asking a question, right? I looked at this problem and I said, I'm going to put it into terms that I would ask somebody else. And that's where I came up with, so I'm going to take this out. I said $28 is 115% of what number? In other words, $28 is equals 115%. I'm going to turn that directly into a decimal. In other words, divided by 100. Of is multiplication, and what number I don't know, so it's x. Okay. Now we do the same thing here when we solve this. I'm going to isolate the variable. I'm going to get x by itself. Because I'm multiplying, I'm going to do the opposite. 1.15. If I divide this by itself, it cancels itself out, right? But when it cancels itself out, guys, remember, I have to also divide by 1.15 over here on the other side. Okay. Now, if you do that, this is what's interesting about this problem. You actually come up with a larger number than what it's there. And so you have to round it. It's like 24.347982. Okay. But we need to remember that we're dealing with money. So when I do this, it's actually x is approximately equal to, see, I do the approximately equal to, and I round it to the nearest cent. So it is $24.35. Now here's the deal. If you go through and you figure out and you're not sure if that's correct, then what you do is you take this and multiply it by the 1.15 to see if you get $28. Now, if I go through, so in other words, my check is to multiply the 24.35 multiplied by, oops, let me put that a little higher up so you can see it's multiplication, not a decimal, 1.15. Now, when I do that, what I get is, and it's a little bit off, that's why I was kind of surprised they did this, because you think they'd work with even numbers to show you an example. But that's why I wanted to go over this. You come up with 28.0025. So if we round this, it ends up being $28. But yeah, that's a little confusing there. And so I wanted you guys to see that it's going to be an approximation. Remember that you're talking about money. And so you want to make sure that you get that 24.35 round to the nearest cent. All right. Okay. So now, bonus question. Let's bring it over here. Okay, this one became a little confusing too, so I want to make sure that I went over this one. This is quiz number 5. Okay, so number 5 on the quiz. Now, what they're talking about here is you have a $60 pair of sneakers, a 15% off coupon, and then a 10% off coupon. Okay, now here's the thing, guys. They think that you should be able to just add that 15 and that 10% and take that off of so it's 25% off. But it doesn't work that way. Okay, it's not correct. If we did that, okay, so in other words, if I added this to 25%, so if I went $60, multiplied it by 0.25, 25%, right? Then what I'm going to end up is I'm going to end up with $15 off. Now, the interesting part of this, and this is for those of you who want to learn a little bit more, if I want to know what the actual cost is, 25%, right? Instead, I could go like this and take the $60 and multiply it by 0.75, the 75%, and I would actually get the amount that the sneaker should cost, which is $45. Okay, instead of having to go back and subtract that $15 from the $60, I can actually do it in one step. So if you understand that, that's awesome. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. If I do this together, it comes at $45. But this is the incorrect way of doing it. What I need to do is I actually need to go through and I need to take the $60 and I need to multiply it by, now this is 15%, right? So I'm going to do this the complicated way that I just showed you here. So in other words, I would do multiplied by 85%. In other words, 0.85. Because 85% and 15% make 100. So what I'm virtually doing is getting 85% of $60, which equals $51. And then I would multiply that by 0.9% because this is 10%, 90%, and 10% make 100. So I'm getting 90% of 51, which equals $45.90. So in other words, if the store went through and did this, and they did this all the way through with the 25% off, they would be losing 90 cents per sneaker. Now that may not sound like a big deal, but if you worked for Foot Locker and every single store in the nation was doing that on every single shoe that they had, pair of shoes, where people had the 15 and 10% off, they're going to lose a lot of money. So yeah, you take the 15% off first, then you take off the 10%, and the actual price should be $45.90. Okay, guys. So hopefully I didn't confuse you too much, but I always want to add a little bit more in. But that's our lesson for today. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions. Ask in class. We'll talk to you soon.